Hey everybody, it's Tim here. So, late to the party, cutting it down to the wire, but I really want to get this done. This is from my buddy David Newton. He's having a fantastic contest through the decades where he wants us to talk about some of our favorite albums from the decades starting in the 70s up until the 2010s. Because, I mean, we just started this decade. I mean, we're going to have one favorite album. Anyway, so I pulled some stuff here. A couple of these decades were really hard. I mean, it kind of threw me for a loop. Sorry if you see my arm shaking here. There's a co-host, new to the family, like as in like hours old to us, a 2-year-old little puppy by the name of Bailey, which we're gonna change the name. We're not sold on the Bailey name, so let's see if I can get a little awe shot. There's Bailey. Say hi. Say hi, Bailey. Like I said, we're not going to keep the name, but because my hand's in the way. But that's the name she has, so we're going to go with it. So anyway, back to this. So we're going to start in the 70s. We're going to move on. So the 70s, I pulled two. I pulled my favorite double LP from the 70s. And both of these two, I don't know, ironically enough, if I were to do my top 100 or whatever, they would both fall in my top 10. So my favorite double album from the 70s is Songs of the Key of Life. Not a bad track, absolute perfection. I thought this was probably one of Stevie Wonder's just genius moments. This and Talking Book, I think, are probably perfect 10 albums. This one, I mean, just because of the sheer content and the message behind it, I think really takes it home for me. But my favorite album of the 70s, there's no discussion. It's Dark Side of the Moon. This is an 11 out of 10. Like I said, it's in my top 10 albums of all time. I know some people go Wall. I know some people go Animals. Some people go with other stuff. To me, this was the perfect mix of prog and psych and just coming off of metal. You kind of knew where they were going with Echoes. This really told you where they were at. They got no better. So that was the 70s. So the 80s was tough. I mean, there was a lot of good music in the 80s. I mean, I grew up listening to music in the 80s. Even though hip hop kind of got its start in the late 70s, in the parks and stuff like that, it really started to become a commercially viable option. And I have somewhere, and I couldn't find it, I was going to show it, a really beat up copy of one of my, probably the album that got me into hip hop the most, which was Eric B. and Rakim's Paid in Full. It's not my favorite hip hop album of all time. That's Public Enemy's Takes a Nation to Hold Us Back, which I have on CD somewhere, but couldn't find that. So wanted to show both of those. I want to give them shouts out. But the other one I want to show for the 80s, and it gets mentioned a lot, but I think a lot of people either know this album or know the hits from this album, and honestly, the hits are the two worst songs on this album. And that's Men at Work, Business as Usual. Everybody knows Who Can It Be Now and Down Under, and to me, they are the two worst songs on this album. They're great songs, they're fine, but I mean, songs like Be Good Johnny, Helpless Automation, Down by the Sea, Catch a Star. There's just so many, to me, more interesting moments than those two. I see why those two were singles. They were very easily digestible, and this came out, 82? Yeah, 82. So I would have been 11, essentially. And for me, this was probably the most grown-up thing I had at that time. And because those two songs were completely different than the rest of the tone of the album, and I think the rest of the tone of the album really captured me more. So for the 90s, yeah, it wasn't even close. It was DJ Shadows introducing. I've talked about this ad nauseum. I swear this is like the 750th video that I have shown something DJ Shadow. So here we go. There's no need to talk about it. Go back and watch any other video I've ever done. You know, hear me talk about it too much. So the aughts, the 2000s. Man, there was there were so many good ones. I mean, you had two albums from Outkast, which their first four. So you had Skank Anya, you had Speaker Box Love Below. I started to get into Radiohead a lot more. Radiohead's earlier stuff, like the Bends and Pablo Honey, meh. I started to get into them around OK Computer, which I still need to pick. I need to pick up all the from OK Computer on vinyl. But like Kid A and Rainbows, that stuff was where I really found my connection with Radiohead. And Kid A is just a killer album. Eminem's Marshall Mathers LP, I think that's one of his best he's ever done. The new one he just did is pretty good. But I went with a more tragic story, a more, man, what could have been. And I love this album. And that's Amy Winehouse, Back to Black. We lost a good one when we lost her. Just an amazing powerhouse vocalist. And this was one that was probably going to set the world on fire for years to come. And we lost her tragically way too soon. This album, to me, is just some of the best of the 2000s. It just absolutely kills. So, if you only know Rehab, you're doing yourself a disservice. Listen to this album. If you have it, spin it again. This is a stone classic from the 2000s. So I had to talk about Amy Winehouse. And then lastly, for the 2010 decade, I've talked about hip hop. I've talked about soul. Didn't get a lot of metal in here, which is weird because you thought I would have pulled out some metal and stuff like that, but I think other channels probably are going to talk about that. And there's a lot of metal to talk about from the 80s. I could go even like this decade, the 2010s. Painkiller from Priest. It's there it is. Not Painkiller, excuse me. Firepower. I know I'm stalling for time. It's bad. I'm dead air on the camera, but this easily probably my top 5 Judas Priest albums. This thing kicks all kinds of ass. So if you don't know it, get it, because damn. So, but the other genre that I feel that I needed to talk about was prog. And there's been a lot of prog. I talked about a little with Floyd, but Jethro Tull is in my top 10, and I could have shown that for the 70s with Aqualung. But lo and behold, there was an album. When did this one come out? 2013. So, and I just discovered this album a couple of years ago, and this person and his subsequent 9,418 bands. That's Steven Wilson. I need to get this on vinyl. This was a Christmas present for my wife. I think it was not last Christmas, year before, because I streamed this album just about every damn day. So this is his solo masterpiece, The Raven That Refused to Sing. Steven Wilson has been in Porcupine Tree and countless other bands. Just so many that he has done this, and he's remixed like stuff from Yes and Gentle Giant and Jethro Tull, and the list goes on and on and on and on. He obviously loves the music that he creates in this prog genre, because I don't know if he takes a moment off. If he's sleeping, he's probably remixing something in his sleep, and it's a masterpiece. So, since this is probably the one that I feel that most people may not be as familiar with, I'm going to end this with a little snippet of the first track off of this album, Luminol. So the idea behind this album is a concept album, that these are kind of like supernatural stories, essentially. At least that's his take on it. And Luminol takes the idea that, luminol, what you would use at a crime scene system, when wipes away the blood, there's no traces, unless you spray that luminol, and then it kind of paints a picture. Well, what happens when we're gone? Do we leave a trace? It's kind of the idea. So I'm gonna leave you with luminol. If you're not familiar with David, please go check him out. Amazing channel, heart of gold, just a really all-around great guy, and really deserves your attention. At least I think so. Link to his channel will be below. If YouTube didn't block it, I did everything right. Here's luminol. If not, oh well. But anyway, take care. Love you all. Talk to you soon. Peace.
To come so far, but end up returning.